Welcome to Royal Secret. In a world where image is everything and loyalty often bends to opportunity, Meghan Markle has become the name on everyone's lips, not for grace or goodwill, but for a relentless pursuit of power that's turned her from a duchess into the most polarizing figure of modern royalty. Behind the shimmering veneers of glamorous photo ops and carefully curated interviews lies a storm of strategy, ambition, and social maneuvering so calculated it could rival any political campaign. And yet, the very authenticity she once stood for, this promise of a modern, relatable royal, has all but evaporated in her uphill sprint toward global dominance. What was once hailed as a breath of fresh air for the monarchy has now morphed into a tornado of PR spin, lucrative contracts, and awkward contradictions. From the moment Meghan Markle stepped into the public eye as Prince Harry's love interest, the world was captivated. Here was a biracial American actress, outspoken and media-savvy, stepping into the rigid traditions of the British monarchy. It was revolutionary, until it wasn't. As months turned to years, what began as a fairy tale gradually began to crack, revealing the raw mechanics behind the polished persona. And what emerged was not just a duchess breaking barriers but a woman hell-bent on social ascendancy, willing to dismantle every obstacle and rewrite every narrative to achieve it. The signs were there early on. Meghan's carefully staged public appearances, her subtle distancing from royal protocol, and the persistent leaks of private grievances hinted at a bigger game behind the scenes. Critics called it a branding exercise, one that turned her marriage to Prince Harry into a platform rather than a partnership. And when the couple famously stepped back from royal duties, it wasn't a retreat, it was a redirection. Their new empire was not about duty, but about influence, and Meghan quickly became the face of that mission. Her collaborations with Netflix, Spotify, and other major platforms were hailed as groundbreaking, but beneath the applause was a growing unease. Where was the sincerity? What happened to the woman who claimed she just wanted a quiet life with her husband and son? Instead, the world was served podcast sound bites, ghost-ridden children's books, and tell-all interviews that felt less like catharsis and more like a weapon. The infamous Oprah interview, in particular, became a cultural flashpoint, not just for what was said, but for how it was delivered. Every gesture, every pause, every tear felt perfectly rehearsed, as if the truth had been tailored to fit a global audience. And yet, the public was split. For some, Meghan was a victim of a cold, outdated institution. For others, she was a master manipulator, capitalizing on the royal brand while simultaneously destroying its foundation. The term, social climber, returned to headlines, whispered with the same bitterness that once followed Wallis Simpson. And still, Meghan pressed on, untouched by the criticism, riding high on media interest, social capital, and the unwavering loyalty of her core supporters. But what happens when the climb reaches its peak? For Meghan, the summit is not Buckingham Palace, it's Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and every elite circle that shapes public consciousness. She doesn't want a crown, she wants control. Control over her narrative, her image, her legacy. And in that pursuit, she has shed the very things that once made her relatable: vulnerability, humility, and transparency. In the public imagination, authenticity is everything. We trust those who seem real, who allow their imperfections to show. Meghan once had that quality, in glimpses: the earnest humanitarian, the vulnerable new mother, the woman navigating love under a spotlight. But with each new deal, each rebranded initiative, and each lawsuit against the press, that authenticity has faded. What remains is a tightly controlled facade, polished but impenetrable, aspirational but alienating. Her fashion choices became messages. Her public statements were dissected not for meaning but for motive. Even her children's names sparked debate: are they tributes or trademarks? Every gesture began to feel transactional, every appearance a strategic move. Meghan, the woman, had become Meghan, the brand. And in doing so, she had crossed an invisible line: no longer a modern royal, but a modern mogul, no longer a victim of the system but a player in it. As Hollywood insiders began to distance themselves and former allies turned silent, Meghan's strategy became even more bold. Rumors of political aspirations surfaced. The rebranding of the Sussexes Foundation hinted at a pivot away from service and toward advocacy, commerce, and influence. With every misstep, whether it was the sudden end of her Spotify deal or criticisms of her handling of charitable initiatives, came another press release, another glossy photoshoot, another pivot in narrative. It was a masterclass in media manipulation, but at what cost? Prince Harry, for his part, appeared caught in the undertow. Once the beloved, spare, with a cheeky grin and military record, he seemed diminished, reduced to a supportive side character in Meghan's unfolding drama. Their joint appearances grew more awkward, their chemistry less convincing. And when Harry's memoir, Spare, hit the shelves, it felt more like a cry for help than a confident step forward. The world watched as he relived trauma, criticized family, and defended decisions that no longer needed defending. Yet Meghan remained mostly silent, letting Harry take the blows while she refined the next move. Meanwhile, the royal family, with its centuries of silence and ceremony, chose not to engage. They knew better. They understood the power of dignity in the face of spectacle. And as Meghan doubled down on her ambitions, filming docuseries, launching lifestyle brands, and chasing Hollywood relevance, the palace remained steady, its silence louder than any rebuttal. So where does that leave the Duchess of Sussex now? In many ways, she has achieved what she set out to do. She is globally recognized, financially secure, and undeniably influential. But in other ways, she has lost the very core of what made her journey compelling. The story was supposed to be about love conquering all, about a woman breaking barriers and finding her voice. Instead, it became a cautionary tale, about the cost of climbing too fast, too hard, and too high without looking back. Authenticity, once her strongest asset, now lies in question. Each new venture is met with skepticism, each public statement picked apart. Even her silence speaks volumes, interpreted as indifference or calculation. And in the ever-evolving arena of public opinion, perception is everything. Once hailed as a symbol of progress, Meghan now straddles the line between icon and irony. In the age of curated reality and influencer diplomacy, Meghan Markle is not just a duchess, she's a blueprint. A case study in how power is built, maintained, and weaponized. Her rise is undeniable, her reach vast. But her resonance, that's slipping, because no matter how high the climb, people still crave something real. And when the curtain lifts, they want to believe there's a human behind the brand. So as Meghan continues her journey, forging ahead with dazzling ambition, we must ask ourselves, at what point does the climb become the fall? And when the applause fades and the cameras turn away, what remains of the woman who once captured the world's heart? And so, the saga deepens. Meghan Markle's journey, already laden with seismic cultural moments, takes on an even more intricate and explosive form as we examine the layers that brought her to this point. A woman who was once praised as the fresh, modern answer to an aging royal family, now standing accused of morphing into the very spectacle she claimed to escape. It's not just about ambition anymore. It's about legacy, image control, and a persistent need to dominate headlines across continents, industries, and ideologies. The modern media landscape is a treacherous game of optics. And Meghan, far from being a casualty, appears to have weaponized it. Every article, every op-ed, every backlash is transformed into an opportunity. And while the mainstream narrative oscillates between victimhood and villainy, Meghan herself never breaks character. She glides from red carpets to humanitarian summits with the precision of a seasoned strategist. But while the surface dazzles, the cracks beneath continue to widen. Her brand, built on empowerment, justice, feminism, and inclusion, has increasingly been questioned by observers who see less advocacy and more opportunism. When Archetypes launched, it promised to dismantle damaging female stereotypes. But its execution, formulaic, celebrity-heavy, and shallow in parts, left critics and even some fans unconvinced. The Spotify partnership that once seemed like a natural evolution of her voice-driven activism soon turned sour, ending with industry professionals alleging that the Duchess didn't meet expectations. One Spotify executive even publicly mocked her, suggesting that she was more grifter than groundbreaker. Then there's the Archwell Foundation, established to support community change and humanitarian impact. Its ambitions were noble, but public scrutiny over transparency, limited grant distribution, and high operational costs began to raise red flags. Where was the real impact? Where were the communities being transformed? The narrative began to shift yet again, from trailblazer to out-of-touch elite. The Meghan Markle who once told young girls they could change the world now seemed more concerned with managing her media presence and launching lifestyle trademarks than rolling up sleeves and digging into real activism. What became painfully apparent to many observers was a recurring theme. Promises were made, spotlights were claimed, but delivery often lagged. Meghan's appearance at high-profile women's events and award shows was often accompanied by buzzwords and brand-friendly soundbites, but what followed rarely lived up to the grandeur of the moment. Her Time 100 summit speech, for example, was supposed to cement her status as a global thought leader. Instead, it left audiences cold, lacking substance and charisma, with reports of awkward silence and sparse applause circulating online. Yet despite the stumbles, Meghan remains a master of reinvention. With each failed deal or public critique, she pivots. From royal wife to activist duchess. From podcast host to potential political influencer. From Hollywood actress to humanitarian. From Montecito mom to rumored future U.S. Senate candidate. There's always a next move, a next narrative. It's almost Shakespearean in scope. Except the audience, this time, is global and hyperconnected, able to trace every contradiction and dissect every shift in real time. Behind all this, however, looms the question of Prince Harry's role. Once the rebellious royal with a heart, Harry now finds himself increasingly eclipsed. His memoir may have been a bestseller, but its impact revealed more personal pain than power. His role within their public-facing empire has diminished, his appearances feeling more symbolic than substantial. And while Meghan's star continues to orbit the celebrity industrial complex, Harry appears adrift, caught between loyalty to his wife and the gnawing pain of separation from his family and homeland. The couple's dynamic has not escaped public scrutiny. What began as a united front, as against the world, now feels uneven. Meghan leads interviews alone. Meghan is the keynote speaker. Meghan appears on covers, podcasts, platforms. Harry, though still present, often fades into the background, a man who once commanded attention now relegated to support. Some commentators wonder if the Sussex brand is still a duo, or if it's become a solo act with a silent partner. This growing imbalance was amplified when Harry made solo trips to the UK, most recently during his security court battle and later for his father's coronation. Meghan, noticeably absent from both occasions, cited scheduling conflicts, media pressure, and concerns for her children's privacy. But the optics told a different story. Royal watchers saw a duchess distancing herself from duties she once embraced, carefully avoiding any public reset with the very institution that launched her to global fame. And yet, Meghan continues to court global relevance in ways that push the boundaries of what a royal should or shouldn't do. Whether it's attending celebrity-packed parties in Beverly Hills, launching eco-conscious business ventures, or holding private meetings with political leaders, Meghan is no longer functioning as a public servant in the traditional sense, but rather as a power player in the upper echelons of celebrity, culture, and influence. There's an irony here that cannot be ignored. Meghan Markle once railed against the invasiveness of royal life, the toxic culture of British tabloids, and the soul-crushing pressures of public expectation. But now she exists in an equally demanding and equally artificial world, Hollywood's fame ecosystem. Her life is curated, her appearances tightly controlled, and her messaging PR-driven to the core. In many ways, she didn't escape the cage, she just upgraded it. And the world has noticed. Public sentiment has grown more divided, with once loyal fans now questioning their allegiance. Online support groups have dwindled while satire and ridicule have surged. From late-night skits to social media memes, Meghan has become fodder for mockery. Even animated shows like South Park have taken brutal swipes at her carefully choreographed public persona, highlighting what critics see as the paradox of demanding privacy while constantly courting attention. Yet Meghan doesn't flinch. She moves on, she rebrands, she rises. Whether she's meeting with key political donors behind closed doors or working on a secret documentary project, the former duchess has made it clear, she's not going anywhere. She may have left royal duties behind, but her thirst for the spotlight is unquenchable. And in this constant performance of self-curation, Meghan isn't just climbing the ladder, she's rewriting its very structure. But here's the danger. In her climb, Meghan has left little room for reflection. The speed at which she pivots from one persona to the next, from duchess to activist to entrepreneur, has created a perception that authenticity was sacrificed for advancement. That the story of the girl who grew up dreaming big became a story of a woman who turned dreams into strategy, relationships into transactions, and fame into leverage. It's not just critics making these observations. Even former friends, ex-colleagues, and anonymous sources once close to Meghan have spoken out, some carefully, others more bluntly, about the Markle effect. They describe an individual who is fiercely intelligent, incredibly driven, but often dismissive of anyone who doesn't serve the current version of her story. For some, the breakups were sudden and cold. For others, it was death by 1,000 subtleties. Phone calls stopped, invites never came, loyalty was no longer reciprocal. This emerging narrative, that Meghan Markle climbs by cutting, is not just cruel gossip. It's a reflection of public distrust toward curated perfection. We live in an era where transparency is king and accountability is queen. Where the audience expects not just charisma, but consistency. And when those expectations aren't met, the backlash can be swift, sharp, and unforgiving. So where does the Duchess of Sussex go from here? Her next move is critical. Will she double down on curated glamour and media empire building? Or will she pause and reconnect with the ideals that once made her so appealing: authenticity, service, and empathy? Does she still possess the vulnerability that once allowed the public to relate to her, or has she grown too distant, too calculated, too untouchable? One thing is clear: Meghan Markle has become more than a royal, more than a celebrity. She is now a symbol of ambition, disruption, and self-determination. And like all symbols, she is polarizing. Loved, hated, analyzed, but never ignored. Don't forget to like, share, and comment if this deep dive opened your eyes to a side of Meghan rarely seen in public discourse. Subscribe to our channel for more bold, in-depth stories that go beyond the headlines. But now, here's the question that truly matters. Can Meghan Markle ever regain the public's trust and restore the authenticity she once promised, or has her climb to the top left behind too much wreckage to ever come back down gracefully? Opening square bracket.